There we go. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR. On Twitter, follow us at Reading by Third. And on LinkedIn, follow us at Campaign for GLR. Please use the hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learned from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. Before we get started, I did want to take a moment to acknowledge our enterprise and programmatic funders, as well as our individual donors. Your support not only allows us to hold these vital conversations, but also helps us create meaningful opportunities to share insights, foster connections, and build the CGLR community. Thank you. As we get started, I have just a few housekeeping details to share with you. First, we'd love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select everyone so that we all know who is here and we can all see each other's chat messages. And feel free to share your thoughts and insights throughout the duration of the webinar. All attendees are currently in listen-only mode, but we do encourage your engagement by posting in the chat box and in the Q&A box. Our panelists will be typing out answers to the questions you post, and we'll be having some time towards the end of the discussion to respond to those questions live. The webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook, and a link to the recording, as well as any slides, bios, and resources, will be sent in a follow-up email to all who registered. And lastly, we'll be posting a brief on-screen poll during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. And before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to highlight some of our upcoming webinars. Later this afternoon at 3 p.m. and next week on the 1st, we will be having a CGLR mini-series that is exploring the impact on children of policies and proposals, with our first session today looking at proposed shifts to the U.S. Department of Education, and the second session looking at the impact of policies and actions related to accelerated deportations. On April 8th at 3 p.m., we'll have another session as part of our Decoding NAEP series, this time featuring a discussion with frontline educators and their reflection on the pace and progress of learning recovery. And lastly, on April 15th, we'll have an exciting funder-to-funder conversation at 12:30 Eastern Time. This will discuss the ways that we are counting on philanthropy and how national and local funders are collaborating to advance early math. More information and registration for these sessions will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope that you can join us. And as we kick off our conversation, joining you now is Jenny Atkinson, Senior Consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Sierra. I want to welcome all of you today to our Crucible of Practice Salon, Georgia Steps Up to Support Summer Learning. This Crucible of Practice series is focused on work happening on the ground in communities and states. In addition to the what, we dig into the how to understand what the work supporting early school success can look like when it is based on the best research and practice, and how communities and states are making this happen. Our goal is to lift up the factors and dynamics that combine to propel progress. We all know that what young people do in the summer is a critical component of their overall school success. High quality summer programs play an important role, especially for young people in low income, low resourced communities. As we start to get closer to summer, we wanted to learn more about the work happening in Georgia. Today, we're going to hear from state and local leaders there who've done impressive systems work with summer and out of school programs in the state through Boost, or the Building Opportunities in Out of School Time grant process. This team has designed, implemented, and evaluated a process to support the work happening in programs throughout the state in a way that's collaborative and focused on nurturing high quality and building capacity, ultimately leading to good outcomes for young people and for the programs themselves. Boost is special because of its scale and comprehensiveness and the innovative ways the team developed a public-private partnership with funding through the American Rescue Plan and used the way the grant program they developed to support, and used the grant program they developed to support and strengthen programs that were receiving funding. And finally, how they incorporated program staff into the evaluation process. We're so lucky to be able to hear the how-to and lessons learned of their broadly transferable strategies today. Our presenters include Jeannie Adams-Myers, the Director of Academics and Outreach with Los Niños Primero USA, Don Boyer, Senior Associate at Metis Associates, Katie Landis, the Director of the Georgia Statewide Afterschool Network, Akia Lewis, the Director of Strategy, Innovation, and Engagement at the Georgia Family Connection Partnership, and Dr. Kenyatta Trace, Associate Director with the Georgia State Afterschool Network. You can read more about our presenters in the bio doc that I will post in the chat momentarily. We'll start today with Katie Landis, who's going to give us an overview of the Georgia Statewide Afterschool Network and Boost, and talk about how Boost was designed. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much for having us here today, myself, as well as my colleagues from across Georgia. I'm excited to share a little bit around what we did, what is Boost, the Building Opportunities in Out-of-School Times Grants Program, how it came to be, and then turn it over to my partners to talk about what we really did with that. And so first and foremost, I will introduce a little bit around who GSAN is, the Georgia Statewide Afterschool Network. At GSAN, we are dedicated to connecting, advancing, and supporting after-school and summer learning programs across Georgia so that all young people, families, and communities have opportunities to thrive. I know we have audience members from across the country here, and so I will quickly say, if you do not know the statewide after school network in your state, I highly recommend you get connected to them. I actually saw a couple of them already on here as audience participants. But if you don't know them and you're curious to learn more as we talk today, reach out, find them. I can help connect you to who they are. All 50 states have a statewide after school network. And while the work that we do in each state looks a little bit different, we are all dedicated to these same goals of high quality out of school time programming in those states. So that is a great resource to start with. We can go to the next slide. And just thinking about Boost and what it is, I'm going to really quickly go through this. This is a slide 4 years old, but still really relevant as we're talking about what is Boost and how it came to be, is the American Rescue Plan Act, so the COVID relief funds. We're really excited here in Georgia to have an opportunity to think differently about how we might utilize some funds and how we might think differently and quickly, but how we can use some funds that were coming to the state. As you probably already know, there was a whole bunch of money coming to the state specifically around education. And so how were states supporting young people during COVID? So this was the ESSER 3 funds. If you look through this flow chart and all the way down to that orange-ish circle down on the bottom right corner, this is the money that we're talking about right here. 1% set aside for after school and a 1% set aside for summer. 1% adds up to a whole lot when the pot is big. So in Georgia, that meant right around $85 million that we had in the state over 3 years to be spent on summer activities as well as comprehensive after-school programming, around 42.3 million for each. And so that is what Boost came from. Next slide. This grant program that we created something from scratch, but the partnership and the foundation of it was not created from scratch, which I think is really one of the key elements of what we did here in Georgia. All of this funding went through the state departments of education, and we at GSAN had a very long-standing relationship with our Georgia Department of Education that we've been really grateful for. And that relationship is what led to this opportunity for us to collaborate and to think differently around what this might look like. A lot of funds through ESSER were directly formula fund to local school districts, and the school districts then did what they did with them. We decided to think outside of the box and think about what could we do with this money if it was a collective. And again, I will keep saying I'm really grateful for this relationship with the Georgia Department of Education, and honored to be a partner with them, but really grateful for them jumping in alongside us to say yes to some of these ideas that we had that took more time, took more effort, but I am really thrilled with what we were able to do over a 3.5-year process. Next slide. I'll get to some of those, real innovations that we took in a minute, but actually I'll talk about some of them right now. But we wanted to look at this funding a little bit differently. And one of those things was making sure that a lot of times we've been in community with programs for 2 decades. And as a nonprofit ourselves, also understand that sometimes when funding comes to you, it's always and how are you going to do more? How are you serving more kids with this funding? While that's absolutely a goal to increase access, we know that's also not the only goal sometimes. So we really clearly wanted to establish 3 program purposes from the beginning, from the outset of this grants program. And all grantees had to be working towards at least one of these purposes. Turns out most of our grantees were working towards 2, if not all 3 of these program purposes with their activities, but this really gave different entry points to the grants program. These are the 3 program purposes. One was exactly what I was just talking about, expanding access, making sure that more youth have access to high quality after school and summer learning experiences. The second one, though, is around reducing barriers to participation. The main pieces that we talked about and really saw here was around transportation, as well as reducing or eliminating any programmatic costs, family fees that might be associated with the program. So in this case, a lot of programs, they might not necessarily be serving more, but they are serving differently, and they are allowing access to different populations into their program. The third one was around strengthening programmatic quality. And so in theory, a program might not even be serving any more youth, but doing, this is not just bringing in a new curriculum. Sometimes it was around bringing in new programming or curriculum. Sometimes we saw in this programmatic quality, we'll hear more about what people did when Kenyatta really talks about the implementation, but we also saw things like programs hiring certified teachers, programs bringing in other services like mental health providers. And so really expanding the breadth of what they did. And again, most programs weren't just limiting themselves to one of these purposes. They really were working across purposes, but it was really important to us to be able to give direct funding to all 3 of these spaces. Next slide, please. I want to focus a little bit around the what this was that we built rather than what happened before turning into the what happened. And these were, not everything around our design, but some of the key design elements that I want to lift up today. These are the spaces where we really looked at what we were doing as something that was a little innovative. And really, we were able to do it because of the public-private partnership that we had. And so with that, a private entity of GSAN coming together with the Georgia Department of Education, how are we able to be a little bit more flexible, a little more nimble, and to really leverage the expertise, the relationships that we already had with programs on the ground, and really bring our subject matter expertise to develop something a little bit different. The first thing here was our focus on community-based organizations. This was also specific to the time. We knew, at least in Georgia, around 2020, 2021, there was a lot of money going to schools, rightfully so, to think about how are they serving differently during that time. We also know during that same time, we saw a lot of community-based organizations really step up in amazing ways to open their doors full day, to step into food distribution in new ways. And for a lot of them, that didn't come with much extra funding, if any, while they were rethinking their program model. And so we knew that this had been an underfunded space in terms of COVID relief funds, at least in Georgia. So there was not a focus, but this grant program was exclusively for community-based programs. So nonprofits, municipalities, really looking outside of school districts who hadn't yet had certain kind of funding to do this work. The second piece that was, I think, a little bit different in what we did was really in the acknowledgement of the very nature of after school and summer programs. And I will say not just the acknowledgement, but the value of the varied nature of these types of programs. That being, some have a real academic focus. Some are, more focused on enrichment and well-being, while others have more of a focus on recreation. All of those types of programs are needed in communities for families and young people to be able to find what really meets their needs. And why I lift that up, because it really, in this part, why I lift it up is because it really informed how we built our application, how we built the request for proposals, and how we also structured requirements from grantees down the road. I'll give a little foreshadowing to what you'll hear later from Kenyatta and Dawn around, this also looked at reporting. We knew that this is a great opportunity for us as a state to gather data around, what these programs were doing, what kind of impact this has on young people over 3 years. But we also know these programs are all doing something different. And so it really, we built something where they got to choose what their outcomes were, what they were really working towards that fit what their programming is. The third piece here is, I'm going to start going through these quickly so you can hear from Kenyatta around what we actually did with this. But the third piece here was around separate funding and separate funding and application pools for what we called our statewide grantees and our community grantees. We looked at this as being really important because one was partly, this is not the main thing, but it was partly looking at how we could do this most effectively and quickly administratively, and knowing that there are networks of programs, and how are we able to really, instead of receiving applications from and then having different grants for 30 to 40 different Boys and Girls Clubs organizations across the state, for example, how might they all apply under the alliance of the Georgia Alliance of Boys and Girls Clubs? That's an example. That is also one of our statewide grantees. But we also really looked at it as an opportunity to reach to some communities and some programs who often don't typically apply for or receive government funding. We know there's a lot of smaller grantees who it's hard to find themselves in these larger grant opportunities. And we wanted to make sure that there were 2 separate funding pools. And so those were 2 of the reasons, because we know that these programs that have well-established reach in a lot of counties in our state are really important as we're trying to look at impact and reach. But we also know that there's a lot of communities that are undertapped. And that really goes to that data-driven priority counties as well. We know, and I'm going to drop a link for this in the chat in a minute, but we know in one of the things that we also do at GSAN, we are a research and policy organization as well. And we have a map on our website of all the government-funded after school and summer programs in the state. We also know there's a whole lot of counties in Georgia. Georgia has a whole lot of counties. We have 159 counties. But of the 159 counties, there was a whole lot of them who, to that date, had no programs, no summer after school programs located in their county that were receiving either 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant, or in Georgia, we had what was called our After School Care Program grant. And if a county wasn't receiving either of those funds, if no program in that county was, organizations located in those counties were priority for us. And you'll hear from Kenyatta that I'm really excited about how we hit so many of those counties with that real prioritization, but also intentional outreach. And the last piece that it was an important design element for us was this reserved funds for targeted grants. What that really was we realized that when we built something new, we had a lot of priorities, we had a lot of goals. We realized the real reality of that whatever we built, no matter how awesome we thought it was, it likely wasn't going to hit all those targets, all those priorities as we'd hoped it would. And so we held back around $5 million of that $85 million total pool in our year 1 allocations, so that in years 2 and 3, we could look at what were some of our targeted populations, our targeted geography, and really say, where did we not meet the mark quite as much as we would like to? And then to have some funds set aside for intentional outreach in those, whether it is a geographic population, whether it is a certain youth population, in future years, in those year 2 and 3 of this 3-year grant program, to intentionally bring some more grantees serving those populations in. Next slide. And so the last thing I'll really, highlight here is how a lot of those elements, I've already hinted to this a little bit, but how some of those elements and more, really influenced our application process. And with our application process, this was something that we wanted to really blend what we see the best of in public funding and the best of in private philanthropic funding, and blend those together as much as we could with this government funded opportunity. So knowing that we already had longstanding relationships with hundreds and thousands of programs across the state, as well as with national experts, we really were able to both design the grants program overall, as well as develop the application and the grantee selection process alongside national experts, and also have it vetted along the way by some of our local out of school time leaders. Having those, we weren't I think one of the benefits of GSAN's relationship and bringing that in here is we didn't even have to do that all in real time. A lot of the things that we knew we wanted to build into this are things that we've been hearing from the field for a decade. And so we didn't have to do quick focus groups on everything. We were able to bring that knowledge that we already had. The second piece was really important to us was around our focus on making sure that all communities, especially communities who are often not networked in, had access to the information, as well as transparency of information along the way. That included, I will drop in the chat when I pass it off in a moment, a link to the RFP. I mean, I will say I think we really struck that balance of wanting to reduce the barriers to entry as much as we could, but while making it as robust as we could at the same time, making sure that it was really clear what our priorities were, what the application was, how the application was going to be scored, what the rubric was, as well as bringing in different elements of programming and to set what funding level you might get funded at. For example, it wasn't a per student funding formula, but those programs serving more students were eligible for larger brackets of funding, as well as programs serving higher percentage of students receiving free and reduced price lunch were eligible for higher brackets of funding. But that's just an example of things that we wanted to make sure everything that we did was available from the outset of the RFP being released. We relied on our partners and communication networks we had to really get this information out into all corners of the state, have several applicant workshop opportunities, all of them recorded and available for viewing afterwards. And we also made sure that any question that we answered from an applicant via email was documented in our frequently asked questions documents that again was publicly available. And we really, that was really important to us, to making sure everyone had access to all the same information. And again, so this is what we built. I am very biased, but I am really proud of what we built and how this was reaching different corners of Georgia in different ways. But I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Kenyatta Trice at GSAN, to talk a little bit around, so what happened and what was Boost as we started to actually administer it, and how did we administer it? So Kenyatta.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Katie. And as Katie said, I'm Kenyatta Trice, and I've had the honor of working alongside Katie for the last 2+ years with administering the Boost Grants program and working with the team of, we call the Boost team at the Georgia Statewide Afterschool Network to support the grantees. Now, central to the design of the program and the partnership was that GSAN would administer the grants program. And what that looked like in real time is we were responsible for the evaluation of the performance of the organization when it came to organizations, grantees, when it came to their outcomes, as well as the amount of youth served that, they projected on the front end versus what actually happened at each year of implementation, and also determining what the funding allocations would be for each year of the renewal period. So the design of the program was that there would be these 1 year renewable 3 times in the grants program in order for programs to continue to run their programs as designed when they came in as boost grantees. In addition to that, we were responsible for processing grantee intake, managing all of the vendor setup with the state education agency, overseeing project modifications because things do change as programs are in the midst of running programs. They decide that maybe we were focusing on STEM education or literacy at one point, but now our focus is going to shift more to, say, enrichment with regard to swimming or, some other program components. So we work with them to make sure that once they modified the programs, they were still within the parameters of what the program was designed to support. Making sure also that grantees were compliant with federal regulations when it came to what they wanted to spend their funds on. So we reviewed all of the budgets for all of the grantees each time that there was a modification, as well as upon renewals. We also established a grant program advisory council in order to make sure that we were tapped in real time to the folks who our decisions would impact the most. And so meeting with them on a quarterly basis in order to determine where things are. A pulse check, these are new updates that are coming. These are things that have to happen with regard to federal regulations that may have shifted in the program. We were also responsible for managing the reporting system, and we had some key partners in doing that. But then we partnered with a third-party evaluator in order by the name of Metis that you'll hear more from today with our, I will say, colleague, even though it is a third-party team that we've worked with or an external evaluator, but Metis, and Dawn is here with us to talk about the process of us collecting and analyzing the data and also monitoring program implementation and grantee performance. The Georgia Department of Education's role was more focused on being the funder for the funds and making sure that once we made the recommendations and they agreed with those recommendations, then they actually, were responsible for administering the funds and financial monitoring. All other parts of the grants program, GSAN was responsible for the administration of that and monitoring. We can go to the next slide. So in our grants program, we had a pretty standard pool of grantees that began with us in year one. And we have 4 statewide organizations that were consistent with us and were renewed each time that they were eligible for renewal. That started with us in year one. That is YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, Communities and Schools, and Georgia Recreation and Parks Association. In addition, we started out with 96 community-based organization grantees that were with us, and most of those remained, as you'll see, in year 3. By the time we got to the final year of the grants program, we had gotten down to 92 of those grantees, so the majority of them staying with us throughout the entire time, meaning that they were successful in reaching their program outcomes, the fiscal responsibility that was required, and staying with us throughout the term of the grants program. Beginning in year 2, as Katie mentioned, we had set aside a portion of our funds, approximately about $4 million, to make sure that if there were spots in the state or pockets in the state where youth that are typically underserved by after-school and summer learning programs were not being supported, we could then work strategically with key community partners in order to get to organizations that were supporting those youth in order to use some targeting grant to get to those populations. Those populations that we had in mind at the beginning of the grants program was youth in rural areas, justice-impacted youth, and youth experiencing foster care. So in year 2, we expanded our grants program to include 6 organizations specifically working with youth experiencing foster care. Then in year 3, our same 4 statewide grantees are with us. We are 92 community-based organizations that are operational. And then we expanded all the way up to 14 target grant organizations to include justice-impacted youth and also youth in rural areas in that final year. We can go to the next slide. So the reach of the boost funding was also a significant objective of the grants program. Another measure we took to ensure that populations historically underserved by after-school and summer learning programs was to work with organizations serving in geographic areas that had not previously received funding, as Katie mentioned, through either the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program or the Out-of-School Services program. And many of those programs service youth and populations challenged by high rates of poverty and low literacy rates. So they were a priority. We defined those counties as high priority in the grants program. Each year, we map the expansion of services to those high priority counties, noted on this map as the dark teal counties that you'll see. We expanded from 17 high priority counties to 45 by year 3. In addition, the overall number of counties boost-supported sites operated in increased by 32% by year 3. In year 1, you will see that boost-supported programs operated in 87 counties. By the end of the 2024 fiscal year, boost-supported programs operated in 115 of Georgia's 159 counties. So that's what you see, the expansion there. As you can see, the gray areas are decreasing as we get to year 3. We can go to the next slide. The youth supported by those organizations also changed throughout the years of implementation, with 86,386 youth being supported during the academic year and more than 82,000 youth being served during the 2024 summer. The majority of youth served were in grades K through 5, which is kind of traditional, if you will, or what's expected of after-school and summer learning programs. However, what we did see is that programs with the boost funds were able to expand to serve youth that typically they had not worked with before, so either middle school or high school populations with the increase or the influx of boost funds. And so K through 5 youth accounted for about 68% of participating youth, but middle schoolers comprised about 20%, and then high school youth coming in at about 12% by the end of year 3. Next slide. So as Katie described earlier, there were 3 program purposes that we prioritized and that Boost Grant organizations had to be working towards, with many of them working with either 2 or all 3 of these areas that they were using the funds to address, either expanding access, improving programmatic quality, or reducing barriers to participation. In the last year of the grants program, 82% of academic year and 86%, as you see here, of summer programs leveraged boost funds to expand youth access to high-quality OST programming. The second most frequent use of boost funds was in improving programmatic quality, and then, of course, followed by reducing barriers to participation. And I'm going to talk a little bit on my next slide. We can proceed with what type of program approaches and activities were done in order to obtain those goals and to reach those goals. So many grantees, including 82% of academic year and 86% of summer grantees, leverage their boost funds, as I said, to expand access to high quality OST programming. Some of the things that happened in order to do that, they conducted community-based outreach and recruitment, and served more youth than in years before, again, as I stated. And then we can go to the next slide, approximately 2/3 or 3/4 of Boost grantees leverage funds to reduce barriers to youth participation. And that is, they continue to offer free or began to offer free program and services, and also provided transportation services, which is a huge hindrance sometimes to participation, because if youth can't get back to their home site after the school day has ended and the traditional buses or transportation is no longer available, then of course students won't be able to come. And so that was a significant investment that a lot of programs use their funds for, in order to make sure, especially during the summer months as well, that students could get back and forth to programs. Right now, I'm highlighting the top 2 things, or the top 1 thing that was cited in our grantees, but we have some reports that we'll point you to at the end of our presentation, where you can look at all of the different program approaches. Again, I'm highlighting the top 2 that were reported for each one of the program service areas. And then next slide. And then finally, programmatic quality improvement was another area that programs could focus on and use their boost funds. And you could see that about 84% and 83% of summer grantees, so 84% in the summer, and 83% in summer grantees use their funds to do this. And that would be expanding existing services or activities, providing youth with healthy meals or snacks, and then also hiring certified teachers to work with students are some of the top most reported areas that are program approaches that programs use their funds in order to support services in order to improve their programmatic quality. We can go to the next slide. So in addition to program activities, supported boost funds had to fall into one of 4 categories, with at least 1 program activity promoting learning acceleration. So that means all programs had to have program activities that was connected to a programmatic outcome goal that was in the learning acceleration area. However, they also had to choose 2 other outcomes. It could be another learning acceleration outcome, or one of these areas that you see listed. So learning acceleration, enrichment, well-being and connectedness, or healthy eating and physical activity. Nearly all Boost grantees reported implementing accelerated learning activities because it was a requirement and mandatory of them. We had about one grantee in the summer that did not report one, so that's why we have nearly all reporting outcomes related to that area. Many grantees also offer enrichment activities as part of the Boost funded programming. The activity most offered included crafts and visual and performing arts. Summer grantees were more likely to provide career exploration, field trips, and job and career readiness than the academic year grantees. The next area, well-being and connectedness, was probably the most cited service after learning acceleration. And Boost grantees offer healthy eating and physical activities as part of the Boost funded programming as well. And that was through healthy snacks and meals during the academic year. And then in the summer, as well as academic year, programs offer sports and other recreational activities that they could then, afford to invest in those parts of their program because they had the funds that they were available in order for them to expand quality in a way or to start including services that they had not done in the past. So we can go to the next slide. So we've talked a lot about the different figures and the outcomes and the measures and the statistics, but what did this actually look like at the program site level? And so what you have in front of you, these are actual pictures from the various programs that supply programs, either just because they would send us pictures, or as we did our yearly reporting, they would submit pictures to us. And so I'll just talk about some real examples of what this looked like for programs on the programmatic level. So with regard to learning acceleration, we have Family Support Circle located in Henry County, Georgia. And they specifically quote that learning acceleration was a key focus of the program, with 84% of their students reporting an improved understanding of a specific STEM or STEAM and English and language arts concept. And this was indicated by pre and post surveys that they took with their students, pre-program implementation and then after post-programmatic implementation. We also have Catholic Charities located in Cobb County, and they utilize a tool to measure growth in English literacy, reading, and oral speaking for all students. Catholic Charities also use school data such as progress reports, report cards, and teacher feedback to assess students' progress in their classes. And they were able to report that students have improved and 100% have advanced to the next grade level. With regard to enrichment, we have another example in Douglas County, Future Seekers. They had 92% of their program participants increase self-efficacy in public speaking and presentation skills, as measured by their student participant surveys that Future Seekers administer to their students each year. We can go to the next slide. Again, more pictures from our programs. And so as I continue to talk about some real programmatic examples that we have reported through our yearly annual grantee reporting. In healthy eating and physical activity, we have Teach OREA located in DeKalb County. And their goal was that at least 50% of their participating students would be more physically active, resulting in improved health and school attendance rates. And that was measured by them looking at absences on report cards as well as report card grades. And they were able to increase their organized sports activity program by 90%, which ensured that every student was more physically active. Another example here is Mercy Housing in Southeast, which is located in Fulton County. They exceeded their projected enrollment with 77% of participants engaged in physical activities, including field trips, free play recreation, outdoor activities, and our field trips that involved exercise. We can go to the next slide. And again, just more pictures because we like to actually see what this looks like real time. So all of these, again, are grabbed from actual programs that were involved in the Boost Grants program. Finally, I'll talk about in Girls Inc. in Cobb County. They had 80% of the Girls Inc.'s participants increase their mental and physical health knowledge, and they measured this through pre and post test results. Another example in Clayton County called Together with Friends. In Clayton County, their end of year survey showed that over 78% of students felt safe and trusted their instructors and college tutors to help them better understand themselves and had a greater sense of ownership of their actions. And so I could give you many, many more examples. Again, we will point you to some case studies that we have been able to collect that gives you a more in-depth look at what this actually looked like on the programmatic level and the program activities that programs funded and supported and expanded to include with the use of Boost Grants Fund. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what our administration included, and we can go to the next slide. So significant focus of our support in the Boost Grants program was to make sure that not only did we bring in grantees, but we were in partnership with them as they work to administer the funds, successfully renew each year, meet their programmatic quality goals, and feel empowered to possibly go for funding that was similar to Boost or federal funding again in the future, feeling as if they were capable of something. We especially went to organizations that had not previously gotten federal funds before. So that can be a daunting task, especially for some of our smaller community-based organizations. So we wanted to be in partnership with them. Our goal was to support grantees in a manner that reinforced, like I said, the partnership that GSAN has always had with the OST community in the state, and to ensure that all Georgia youth have quality access to quality OST programming. I got my words mixed up. And our TA approach was human-centered. It was success motivated instead of being one that was about compliance focused. It was focused on making sure that you could be successful in administering your funds. Also focused on building capacity. We didn't want to have programs that were able to be flourishing while they were a Boost grantee, but not able to sustain that afterwards. And then also to be a liaison between community-based organizations and our state education agency, which is the Department of Education. And part of that is this was the first time that we had this opportunity to support community-based organizations in this way. The Georgia Department of Education was very versed in supporting education institutions, but community-based organizations had different expense needs, different ways of accounting, different ways of thinking about what was needed in order to fund a program. For instance, an example is having T-shirts in order to go on field trips. For some, that could seem as it's like a cosmetic thing, but actually with summer programming and after-school programming, your T-shirts are a safety measure. If I can easily identify all of the kids in my group in a yellow shirt or blue shirt or whatever color it may be, that's part of the actual supplies that I need to safely run my program versus something that may be cosmetic. So that's just one of the ways that we served as a liaison. There were many different expenses that we were able to translate and help to show the need to the state education agency so they would be eligible expenses. We can go to the next slide. So some of the things that we sought to do is to not only just be available to grantees, like I said, as the person that reviewed your budget, but if you had trouble with putting together a budget, we were there to walk with you penny for penny. I was about to say dollar for dollar, but actually penny for penny to make sure that you were able to get a budget that was in alignment. What you have in front of you here is just the satisfaction that grantees reported with our overall experiences with our TA. The dark teal representing, excellence, are very satisfied with it. And then going all the way down to the very light green color, which you barely see any of on the map. And this is just for us, a quality check for us to make sure the type of TA that we were providing was what grantees needed and it was actually effective. And so some of the things that we were able to do was like, data and reporting, having supports for that. Dawn is going to talk a lot more about what that looked like. Also making sure that they were able to invoice. So we didn't just want to award the funds, but you can access the funds and get reimbursement because these were reimbursement-based grants. And also overall, like vendor management, there's turnover in organizations. So when a new person comes into the organization, we walk with you hand in hand to get that person set up so that they can access all of the systems and continue the operational functions of the organization without any glitches in the timeframes that you had to get invoicing done. We can go to the next slide. Another significant portion of the grants program was programmatic quality improvement. So we didn't just want to have programs that were available to everyone. We wanted to make sure it was quality. And so another component of this was, and we can go to the next slide, was our program quality supports program. We had a 4-tiered model that included on-demand resources and supports. Our second tier was live training and sessions. Tier 3 was small group coaching. And then, of course, individualized coaching and assessment of quality and coaching around that. In years 2 and 3, we responded to feedback that we got from grantees about what was needed and where our focus should be. Then that shifted our focus in the last 2 years of the program to focus more on tiers 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and then I'm just going to pause for just a second and go over to Jeannie for just a minute. And Jeannie is with Los Niños Primero and one of our Boost grantee organizations.
I'm going to jump in and just say we're so excited to have a program partner with us for this presentation. I've been loving hearing about the details of how the program has been set up and administered, but we thought it'd be really super to hear a little bit about how it was from the program perspective. And those joyful pictures that we saw really, I think, set the stage for having Jeannie come on next. So a couple of questions, Jeannie, we'd love to hear you address. We'd love to know a little bit about how you at Los Niños used the boost funds and what the impact was, as well as how the design that Kenyatta was just describing of the grants program helped, and the TA that you received, helped facilitate your successful implementation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And the first pictures that came up, I believe, were Los Niños students during our summer in 2022. We're really excited. The funding really allowed for us to intentionally and sustainably expand. So at Los Niños, we leveraged the boost funds to strengthen and expand our programs, ensuring that the Latino students in Metro Atlanta received high quality educational and enrichment opportunities throughout the summer and the school year. We received $587,000 over 3 years, and we were strategic in how we allocated those resources across multiple areas. So a significant portion of that went to funding towards covering contractual fees for Georgia certified educators. That was 28% of the funds that we received. This allowed us to maintain a really strong instructional foundation for our students, and we recognize that during that time, during COVID and post-COVID, that was very necessary. Another 28% helped us support our youth development and family engagement teams, ensuring that students received personalized support and that families remained actively involved in their children's education. This was already mentioned, but we recognize that transportation is a key barrier to access, and we dedicated 20% of the funds that we received to student transportation, making it possible for more children to consistently participate in our programs, not only in the summer, but throughout the school year also. We invested 9% of the enrichment programs like chorus, orchestra, dance, and soccer, broadening students' learning experiences beyond the classroom and bringing back those really essential extracurriculars after the pandemic. To sustain the program effectiveness, we also allocated 15% to data support, educator training, classroom supplies, and healthy snacks. And this ensured that both the students and the educators had the resources that they needed to really implement a successful program, to continue to implement a successful program. The impact of these investments was really profound. By funding those certified educators and supporting the staff, we enhanced the academic instruction and provided critical whole child learning opportunities. We continued to do that really effectively. We also increased the transportation access, which led to improved attendance and engagement from both the students and the parents participating in programming, while the enrichment programs fostered that creativity and teamwork and a sense of belonging within our students. Finally, that investment in training and data support really strengthened our own ability to measure the progress of our programs and continuously review and improve what we did. So ultimately, those funds really enabled us not only to sustain, but elevated our services, ensuring that more students and families could benefit from that innovative and high quality programming experience. Now, it really, again, was very transformative for us. The impact was it allowed us to expand our reach and deepen our connection with the communities that we served. Over the course of the funding, we increased the number of students and families that we served each year, which is a testament to the power of that targeted investment in education and community engagement. There's some numbers that I'm going to give you here that are, part of what Kenyatta was sharing, but we were able to increase over 100% involvement or engagement in the summer programming. In 2021, we had 235 students participating in summer. By 2024, we had increased that to 486 students just in the summer programming. Latino student engagement really flourished, and those classrooms were becoming collaborative and dynamic spaces. We witnessed that restored sense of hope and joy in learning from our students and our educators. Throughout that implementation, we were able to also really study and apply that finished pedagogy that we're really intent on applying in our systems. And Educators gained a greater autonomy in the classroom and a deeper commitment to their craft, which was something that was really needed at the time that we started receiving that funding. With the additional resources, we were able to open more classrooms across the sites that we currently had, and also to build the collaborative partnerships with communities, school districts, and other student-serving organizations in the locations that were seeking support for their Latino students. We also increased the volunteer participation, which was very exciting. In 2021, we had 55 youth who were committed to volunteering and participating in civic engagement. By 2024, we had over 350 youth, and that's middle and high school students that were participating in our civic engagement programming. Our parent engagement program also significantly increased, with more families actively participating in the workshops and community activities. So last year, we had over 400 parents participate in leadership and educational programming. And we were really excited to meet our goal of having 100 parents graduate from the Fostering Family Leaders program that we partner with the United Way to provide. And this is a fundamental part of our organizational model because we strongly believe that supporting families really amplifies the impact on each child. This growth is really meaningful during the pandemic when we expanded our outreach and strengthened trust within our satellite sites. As a result, the new families that we nurtured have remained really connected to us and have encouraged others in their communities to engage. So we're continuing to build that trust within our communities and out of school time programming. Now, I want to talk about the phenomenal design and support that GSAN provided through that Boost grant. One of the greatest benefits of that funding through Boost was the high quality training and technical assistance that it provided for each one in our organization. It had a direct and positive impact in our programs. The professional development really empowered our staff to develop and enhance more effective programming in the community. So they allowed us and provided access to key learning opportunities from participating in the ASYD conference and NAA conferences, which were invaluable, but they also provided ongoing professional development sessions that strengthened each member of our team's capacity in implementing those out-of-school time practices. The support from those seasoned professionals with diverse backgrounds in out-of-school time played a crucial role in shaping my own experience here. So I, along with a lot of my staff members, engaged in sessions that aligned with our mission. We had a variety of options, and anything from data and outcome sessions to youth voice were sessions that were very meaningful and we were able to implement in real time. These trainings also covered topics like mental health, cross-organizational collaboration, program development and implementation, school and district partnerships, which became really crucial for us as an organization as we expanded, staffing and effective management strategies. So, by equipping us with those really necessary skills as we expanded, the program's training and technical assistant was directly contributed to the success of this implementation, because we went from an organization that had 2 to 3 full-time employees to 11 employees in a time where all of that support was very, very necessary.
Thanks so much, Jeannie, for your perspective. That's super helpful. And we'll be hearing more from Jeannie a little later, but I'm going to turn it back over to Kenyatta to talk a little bit more about the quality supports provided and then move into the evaluation piece.
All right. Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you so much. It's always good to hear exactly what that looked like from someone who actually was on the other side of the partnership with us. And are you all able to hear me okay? I'm getting a notice from about my internet connection. Okay.
Good.
All right. So some of the activities, I saw this as one of the questions that was posed in the Q&A section, but some of the things, and I'm just going to highlight some high level things here, but we had a small group coaching that was available. We had 5 in year 3. I'm giving you numbers from year 3. So these things happened throughout the entirety of the program. I'm just highlighting, the last year here. But 5 small group cohorts for after school and youth development, quality standards coaching, data and outcomes coaching, and then as well as leadership leadership coaching for junior level leaders. Overall, we had about 1,300 total participants in 115 different training sessions. As Jeannie just told you, some of those training sessions were in the areas of management and operational practices, as well as we had sessions in grant writing and management, and some other things that I'll talk a little bit more about when I talk about some key partnerships that we made. We also had virtual, in-person, and professional development sessions that focus on these areas. So staff practices, organizational practices, youth development programming, and of course, sustainability. We can go to the next slide. And this is just a quote from one of the Boost grantees. In the interest of time, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here on this quote because you just heard from Jeannie, and she was able to attest to how the difference that these things made for organizations and supporting their work. So we can go to the next slide. And this is just an overall what the most, I guess you would say, satisfying quality supports were and some of the areas that we offered. So scholarships for organizations to send just more than one person, if you will, to a conference that was focused on after school and youth development, or the National After School Associations Conference. So we did scholarships there for organizations to go. We also had after school institutes, webinars, and trainings. And as you can see, in the dark teal area is the dominant, if you will, so very effective part of these stack bar charts that are available here. And there was also another partnership that I'll talk a little bit more about with the Georgia Center for Nonprofits, and they had certificate training series so that you could take not just a one-time course about grant writing, but an actual 6-part series or a 6-part series in management, and then become certified at the end of those series in order to say that you have taken this this course with a reputable organization that is a subject matter expert in this area. And so we can go on to the next slide here. So we had some key partnerships in order to pull off this multi-tier quality supports model that we had. And so one of the organizations I just talked about, the Georgia Center for Nonprofits, some of the key series that they offered was grant writing and management, certificates in fundraising essentials, and certificate of supervision and management. And these were some in person and some virtual. And as we got closer to year 3, some of these things shifted from being in the virtual only format, of course, to being in person as well. But we had organizations who were able to take advantage of going into these programs, going to these offerings. Another thing that we offered as well is what's called a voucher program. We are smart. We know a lot of things at GSAN. We're familiar with the community, but we may not know what every organization or every person in an organization may need professional development regarding. And so we had a voucher program where organizations could come to us, get a voucher, and then they could go to the Georgia Center for Nonprofit and choose any course. There were a few exclusions, but very few exclusions, in order to go and take a course on their own or participate in, a session that they thought was more fit for what their needs or where they were in their professional development. So we had 2 sides of our partnership. So the voucher program, as well as the series that were offered for Boost grantees that we pre-selected for them to participate in. We can go to the next slide. Also, as I mentioned, the conferences that we had, organizations were able to get scholarships in order to attend. And so we had cohorts anywhere from 50 to about 89 participants participating in those conferences, and they will get the scholarship in order to go. And it was a stipend of sorts. So, supplementing the cost for them to be able to participate in those conferences. And so that was another aspect of making sure that organizations were not just providing the direct services, but also connecting back to the professional networks to help to improve quality as well as themselves as professionals. We can go to the next slide. The data and outcomes professional learning community, we partnered with an organization called Transformative Research and Evaluation. And this was a 6-session cohort-led type of model where organizations were able to learn more about how they can use data to empower themselves, the decision-making, improve their organizations, as well as funding, and working on their specific needs as an organization. So you come in, you're connected to a coach, there's group coaching that's connected to this as well, but as well as individualized coaching in order to move the needle on whatever it is that organization was focused on with regard to their data and outcomes needs. And so we can go to the next slide. We also had a cohort of young professionals for leadership coaching. And what our goal here is to make sure that we are feeding back into the professionals. So a lot of folks come into the out of school time space. We like to say it is a training grounds for all different arenas of society for people to learn some professional skills, and then they go on to different places in their professional careers. Well, we also want to retain those amazing professionals that come into the out of school time space, and so that they have opportunities for upward mobility and they see the value in that. So working with entry or junior level associates who were in the leadership space or just entering the leadership space to give them those skill sets to see how they could grow in the spaces where they were in partnership, and to do that. And so this was a leadership cohort that we had. And we had some individuals who experienced some upward mobility by the time this cohort was over. So going from the level that they were in their organizations and promoting up to the next position that was available with the same organization, which is what we love to see. Next slide. Another key area that we wanted to focus on and did focus on in the Boost Grants program was working to support rural grantees. We know that in a lot of our rural areas of the state, organizations are smaller. And one of the things that we kind of reviewed in our process of administering the Boost Grants program, we had a model at first that said that there would be no, because there was funds that were already going into the education institutions and into the schools. And so we were not funding any schools in our particular set of funds for the out of school time programs. But what we found is that inadvertently, we had excluded some of our rural partners because a lot of times they use education institutions or education agencies like their state board of education or their local one in order to be their fiscal agent, because they're so small, they can't handle the administration of those federal funds. And so in working with another community partner, Georgia Family Connection Partnership, we were able to correct that portion of our program in order to bring in some more rural grantees. And then not just bringing them in, again, we're focused on sustainability and making sure that those programs are able to have the capacity to continue afterwards. We partner with Georgia Family Connection Partnership to talk about different ways that we need to support the professional development for those organizations. Who I have here with me today is someone who was key in putting that part of our program together and supporting grantees for that portion of our quality supports. And she is Akia Lewis with Georgia Family Connection Partnership. And I will turn over to her to talk a little bit more about what those supports look like for grantees in rural areas.
Thanks, Kenyatta. Hi, everybody out there in Zoom world. I'm Akia Lewis, and really to understand how we supported this is important to know a little bit about Georgia Family Connection Partnership. I will be brief, but it'll make sense in the end. So the partnership started in the early 1990s as a response to the First Kids Count report. Georgia was number 49 out of 50 at that time. And the governor at the time, Zell Miller, had this idea, like, what would it look like if we had an entity whose sole purpose was bringing together all the partners in the county to write and implement a plan to solve local problems in the county. That experiment ultimately became Georgia Family Connection Partnership, and there is now a family connection in all 159 counties in Georgia. So the combination of that and being the host agency for the Get Georgia Reading campaign, Georgia's third grade reading initiative, really gave Georgia Family Connection Partnership a unique opportunity to sort of know what was going on in the field, who might be interested in this work, and how we can sort of support and bring them along. And I should mention that I have dual roles with Georgia Family Connection Partnership, in addition to leading the division that's mostly a partner outreach division. I'm also one of the two people that supports the grade level reading campaign in Georgia. So from these two things, we have access to a lot of data. We also have a regional support team who are embedded in the county, and they know what's happening in that region. Through that, we were able to engage 23 rural counties and cross-reference them by who was already receiving federal funds, who might be interested in this work, and ultimately recommend the counties to come in. And from this knowledge base that we have about what happens in rural counties and how and what's missing, we were also able to sort of support them in thinking about sustainability. And when I say sustainability, I don't necessarily mean going out and finding additional funding, but sustainability and what does it take to actually first determine what needs to be sustained, and then provide a comprehensive plan that looks at things like partnership work, that looks at things like how are we bringing up the next generation of leadership, because we know that in a lot of rural communities, there is one person who is the mover and shaker, and they are bringing partners to the table. But what happens when that person leaves for whatever reason? They could retire. It doesn't have to be anything terrible. I often hear people talking about, oh, if somebody gets killed. No, if they retire. So how do we sort of bring up the next generation of leadership to support sustainability as well? So we've provided, in addition to supporting those counties and being onboarded in those targeted areas, we provided supports to help them think through what is comprehensive sustainability. What does that include in addition to fundraising? Do I even need fundraising? Is there a partner I can bring into this conversation that's already doing the work and I can influence how that works? Am I looking at what I'm doing and seeing that I have results and determining what needs to be sustained? Or am I just, have I just gotten money to do this, so I think I automatically have to sustain it? How does my evaluation play into that? How do I communicate these results effectively, not just to a funder, but to partners and parents and the stakeholders that I need to bring into this work? So we provided, I think, 4 sessions focused on those results, in addition to leveraging our own TA networks, because we knew at this time who the rural counties were that received this funding to sort of support the technical assistance and implementation that they were already receiving.
Thank you, Akia.
You're welcome.
And so I'm going to talk, move on from our discussion about quality supports, because we spent a great deal of time and we could talk a whole lot more about that portion of our program. I see a question here that I'll address real quickly, how we continue our outreach and what's beyond the grant cycle. So we are in the post-boost world at this point. We knew that we couldn't just, because of our own model and values about how funding should work and how funders should be responsible to grantees, we didn't just stop all of our quality supports at the end of the grant cycle. GSAN overall as an organization, beyond just the Boost Grants program, had a robust quality supports program, if you will, and offering that. And so what we did in our final year of the grants program is start to make sure that folks who were not previously connected to GSAN knew about all of the other offerings that were available free to the state of Georgia. And so you just have to be connected to our newsletters in order to get access to those things, know when they're happening, and sign up for them. And so in our final year, we're still offering those things. They are tailored to match very closely to what is available to all of the supports that are offered by GSAN as a whole to the state of Georgia, but making sure that folks went over from being a Boost grantee overall to our just connection of community partners and community organizations that we work with. And so that's one of the things that we have continued to do. So everything didn't just stop in year 3 after the grants program ended. And so if we're going to put back up the presentation, now we're going to shift to talk a lot more about what the evaluation of this robust grants program looked like. So we had a external evaluation partner that we were able to find through an RFP process. And they were one of the organizations that submitted to that call for proposals for an external evaluator. And we have been in partnership with them in a highly participatory model between ourselves and the organization, which is Metis Associates, in order to do a multi-year evaluation with multi-prongs of the evaluation, different studies that have taken place. I am now going to pass the conversation over to our external colleague and partner in evaluation, one of the amazing individuals we got a chance to know over this last 3 years, which is Dawn Boyer. And so now I will pass it over to her to talk about what that evaluation entailed and what it looked like.
Thank you, Dr. Trice, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so excited to talk about our work with GSAN on the Boost initiative. Metis Associates is an external research and evaluation firm with a nationwide reach. We are headquartered in New York City, but we do work with clients all over the country in a wide range of efforts and topic areas. But out of school time is one of the areas that we have a lot of experience in. So we were really excited to partner with GSAN on this statewide initiative. If we can go to the next slide. So I'm just one member of the Boost / METIS evaluation team. There are at least 3 or 4 other colleagues who gave me the distinct pleasure of meeting or speaking with you all today. So we did have 3 different components of the evaluation that were all kind of working together. So we kicked off the implementation study in the first year, which really helped us document what was happening, what was working, everything from service delivery to youth satisfaction to challenges and success stories. So all of those important lessons learned along the way regarding implementation. In the second year, we added 2 more components to the study, which included the outcome study, which really looked at how youth were doing. Specifically, we tracked things like learning acceleration and how connected they felt, and just their overall well-being. And then alongside that, we launched the system study to examine some of those behind-the-scenes aspects that we heard about today, like how effectively was Boost being overseen and administered, and importantly, whether it could be sustained long-term. So today I would just be focusing on some of the activities and findings from the outcome study and the systems study. Next slide. So for the outcomes study, we mainly relied on the annual reports that grantees submitted. These reports came through the Flux system, which is an online grantee application and a reporting portal that the United Way of Greater Atlanta had set up and managed for the Boost initiative. So I think Kenyatta touched on this, but during the grant application phase, Boost grantees were required to develop 3 outcomes for youth participants in any of the 4 Boost areas. At least one had to be in learning acceleration, and then they could have the other 2 outcomes relate to any of those 4 areas: learning acceleration, enrichment, healthy eating and physical activity, or well-being and connectedness. And then at the end of each academic year, and as well as the summer program periods, they submitted these annual reports to GSAN via Flux. And this included a series of questions about how they measured their progress towards their proposed outcomes and what progress they had made that year. So we figured that we would just be able to report on the percentage of grantees who had met their outcomes or did not meet their outcomes each grant period. However, when we reviewed the Flux submissions in year 1, it became pretty clear that we needed to come up with another process for that. It was really difficult in some cases to determine whether grantees met their outcomes or not, as quantifiable targets were missing from about 1/3 of all of the proposed outcomes. So therefore, we determined that some technical assistance would be needed for grantees around the development of SMART goals. Next slide. So most of you are probably, familiar with the term SMART goals, meaning the outcomes needed to be specific and measurable, relevant, time-bound. Why am I forgetting what the A is? It'll come to me. You guys can Google it. It's a thing, trust me. And so as part of the technical assistance process, we reviewed each grantee's outcomes as they had proposed them in their application, and then just to see if they had any quantifiable targets. We also looked at whether they had any issues with collecting data that they needed to measure their outcomes. So from that, we then organized the grantees into these 4 tiers that you can see here in the slide. So grantees in tier 1 had no quantifiable targets, and that was about 29 out of the roughly 90 grantees. And then in tier 2, these folks maybe they had a target or two, but maybe they were also missing some data, which kind of indicated maybe they need some help with identifying data sources that they could easily access in order to address their outcomes. So we prioritize our technical assistance to the grantees in Tier 1 and Tier 2, which ended up being about 40% of those grantees in year 1. Next slide. So as an initial step in the TA process, I put together a summary document that gave some guidance on how to develop those SMART goals. Oh, look, there it is, attainable, that's the A. And then so it gave some tips for, how to do SMART goals on the first page. And then on the second page, it had customized information for each grantee that was in Tier 1 and Tier 2. Like, this is your current outcome. And then there's a space where they can submit their revisions to us. So we emailed those out to these grantees individually. Those who felt comfortable making revisions on their own, we gave them that opportunity. Others, if they felt like they needed a little bit more support, they were able to schedule one-on-one TA support sessions with me, and I would go over their outcomes with them and really talk through, all right, how can we turn this into something that's measurable, but also really captures, the spirit of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And so about half of the grantees, so about 23 grantees, opted to revise their outcomes on their own. So I would just review what they wrote, and we would meet as a team and decide if we were okay with those, if we should approve them or send them back. And then the remaining 17 grantees, pretty much mostly those who were Tier 1, did schedule TA calls with me to discuss those revisions. Next slide. On this slide, you can see some of the examples of the types of outcome revisions. So in the first example, the original outcome was pretty vague regarding the who or the when or the how much. And so after discussions with the grantees, you can see that we were able to identify a target of 70%, and then also what the data source was going to be for that particular outcome. The second example has even more specificity in the revised version regarding the who. So students at the end of the 6-week program that have both a pre and a post test. And then, the STAR data, and then how much. So an increase in grade level equivalency, and we established a target. I could have been a lot more pedantic in, regarding specificity with things here and there. But again, I was really just trying to make it so that grantees had an opportunity to, kind of take a step into what it looks like in this process to develop more SMART outcomes. Next slide. So in this slide, you can see the change in outcome measurability from year 1 to year 3. And this is just our summer grantees. And so in year 1, only about half of the summer grantees had outcomes that were measured. And then in year 2 and 3, after the outcomes TA process, the percentage shot up to 97% and pretty much stayed at that level in year 3. So I just wanted to point out that this includes data for 89 summer grantees, but recall that each grantee has 3 outcomes. So 3 times 89 would be, 267, and so on. So I just want to explain why there are so many in the ends brackets. But we did see a huge increase in the number of outcomes that were measured. And then next slide. This one shows that similarly, there was an increase in the percentage of summer grantees who achieved their outcomes. So in year 1, we only had about 40% who were able to say that they achieved any of their outcomes. And after going through the TA process and making the measurements more clear, we were able to get that up to 79 to 82% in years 2 and 3. Next slide. So I noted previously that we had done a systems study, and that really focused on quality and effectiveness of the Boost oversight, administration, and sustainability efforts. And so in the next few slides, I'll provide some highlights from this portion of the evaluation. So in year 2, we conducted a series of interviews with key boost partners. So folks from the Georgia Department of Education, Voices for Georgia's Children, United Way of Greater Atlanta, the 4 statewide grantees that were mentioned before, as well as national and statewide out-of-school time experts and consultants who had knowledge of the GSAN Boost initiative. So several talked about the success of the initiative in improving program quality, expanding youth and family access to quality programming, and creating that sustainable public-private partnership were some of the things that came out in those interviews. For example, many people that we spoke with really praised the Department of Education's decision to team up with GSAN and to run and support Boost. Having a private organization like GSAN brought something special to the process. Most folks said that GSAN was an obvious partner choice because, one, they really know what works best in out-of-school time programs, and some even called it a model that should be replicated elsewhere. And others pointed out that community-based organizations, which were primarily targeted for these funds, already knew and trusted GSAN. And so there was that relationship that was there. They felt more comfortable working with them than possibly a government agency like the Georgia Department of Ed that they may have never worked with before. So these types of things just really contributed to a sense of partnership and collaboration, which I think really helped grantees to build their technical capacity. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like at the grantee level on the next slide. So in year 3, in order to, kind of test these findings at the grantee level, METIS developed a survey for grantees to talk about the different best practices that they used in out-of-school time programming that fell within 6 different implementation areas that you see listed here. And all of those align with Georgia's after-school and youth development quality standards. So most of the grantees were already really familiar with these practices and these standards. And what we asked them to do was rate their level of implementation of each of these practices before Boost and then after Boost. And they used a 5-point scale. And then we just calculated mean ratings for each of them just to get a sense of where folks were in terms of their implementation in each area. On the next slide, you will see results from that survey and the rating scale that was used. So a 1 denotes that this practice is not in place and probably still needs to be planned out, whereas a 5 is this is a strength of our organization and this practice is fully in place. And so, you can see that gains were greatest for practices in the areas of service delivery, program sustainability, and evaluation and data. So in each of these areas, grantees rated themselves at a 3.4. So that's about a 3, which means on average, these practices were partially in place. But then post-Boost, they rated themselves at a 4.3, so about a 4, which corresponds to the rating of the practices in place with opportunities for improvement. And when we applied statistical testing onto those data, there were significant increases in every single one, not only the composite variables that we use to create these larger categories, but even within the specific practices, every single practice, you saw significant changes from pre to post Boost in grantees' use of these practices. So I'll give you a couple examples. Things like staff access to meaningful professional development and career advancement opportunities. That was a practice that showed significant change from pre to post Boost. Enhanced communication with community partners, including school districts or schools, about things like students and family needs and resource sharing opportunities. And increased comfort and readiness to apply for government grants and using evaluation data to sort of justify that future funding support. So these were just some of the things that came out of our evaluation. And so I want to hand it back over, I believe, to Jenny, who's going to introduce one of the grantees to talk about their perspective.
Thanks so much, Dawn. It's really fantastic to see the results, both the outcome and the systems results, and hear as well about how you worked with grantees to build capacity. We have a few more minutes, and there's a couple more things we want to get to. So I wanted to bring back Jeannie to just hear a little bit from her about how the quality supports and evaluation supports that were provided helped with her program at Los Niños Primero. So Jeannie, you can take it away.
So we were really very happy with how exceptionally happy with the support that was provided. But we do recognize that Boost, the team at Boost was very reflective and responsive in how they curated what was needed. I think that I want to take my time and say that we're very grateful for Justin Swart. Justin, I'm going to call him Justin. What's his last name, Katie? He was incredibly thorough, very responsive, and we could not thank you enough for the connection that he made and the support that he provided, especially for organizations like ours that had not had the opportunity to work with grants in this arena. He made it absolutely incredible as we connected to the Georgia Department of Education. Without that support, we don't know what we'd have done. And then also to mention the quality exploration that the team at GSAN provided. They sent somebody to come and actually do a visual one-day exploration of our site and provide feedback about where we could improve, what we were doing well, and where we could improve based on the quality standards. That was incredibly meaningful, impactful, and it's something that we use to this day as we plan for summer and for after-school programming. We review the feedback that we got, we work on little chunks and bits of that, and we go back to the standards and choose something else that we want to tackle. So all of the supports that were provided, those are the two that we are always talking about, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. So finally, we want to turn to our last question. You know, with all this funding in the face of the pandemic, I think we've heard some questions about how did this really impact our programs? Was this really worth it? And I feel like this program is this whole initiative is one that really shows how this kind of investment can make a huge difference, not only in the moment, but in building long-term systems that over time will continue to really serve communities and children. So we're so excited to hear, you know, all about what you have done, but wanted to kind of turn now to, like, with the funding, as we know, kind of ending, what are your next steps? What are your recommendations about what you've learned? So I'm going to turn it to Katie to talk a little bit about that. I think she's going to be able to address the last question in the chat as well. And so we'll look to hear from you, Katie.
Absolutely. And I know we're short on time, so I will make this quick. If we can pull up those last slides of really, you know, yes, this funding is over. The funding to the programs ended in summer, fall of 2024. But, you know, there's a lot of lessons learned from that. These are recommendations that came directly from the 3-year evaluation. I'm going to just go through these quickly. I was going to give you a little bit more detail on these. We don't have time right now, but in the chat, we'll drop it again in the chat, so it's fresh in the chat, is our evaluation brief. We have our longer full evaluation report coming out. I look at my watch like that's going to tell me, but I would say in April. But you can find more detail on all these recommendations if you're interested in thinking about what this might look like in your state or your community. If you are looking to do something similar, these are the recommendations from our evaluation report. Is one in Georgia is to maintain that public-private partnership structure. You heard it from Dawn in terms of the system study. We saw it in terms of, you know, we heard it from Jeannie and other grantees in terms of their reaction. There was a lot of power in the partnership there. Around continuing the comprehensive technical assistance and quality supports, I will lift up that was asked and answered in the Q&A around where did our funding come from to do those quality supports. I think that was a really big piece that we are really grateful for our partnership with the Georgia Department of Education. When they contracted with us to administer this, it wasn't just to run the application, select grantees, do the technical assistance, but it also included that training, the coaching, all of those quality supports Kenyatta talked about, as well as a more robust evaluation than we typically see in some government funded programs. So those parts were invested in, and investing in those pieces, I think, is a really important. Third recommendation was around prioritizing the varied geographic distribution. So really that intentional prioritization of counties where they were not already receiving government support. Maintaining focus on high-need youth populations. Addressing the critical implementation challenges. Some of those included things like educator recruitment and retention, transportation, youth mental health. And so finding ways to prioritize some funding to address those challenges. And the last one is around implementing a sustainable funding model. And you can go to the next slide as I talk about that. And so I will just say GSAN, we are a policy and advocacy organization outside of our administration of this government grant program. And this is, we are really grateful for the success that we had with Boost, and it is what we are pushing during our current legislative session of asking the state to find some way to invest in this model that we have built so that we can sustain this. So that is what we are currently working on. Right now in Georgia, our legislative session wraps up next Friday. So we will see sooner rather than later if there's investment there within our state budget to be able to continue some of this work. And it is 1:59, Jenny. So I think I wrapped that up really quickly. If there was another question, Jenny, if you...
Yeah, we can follow up. We can follow up on that. So no worries right now. I want to thank our presenters so much. It's not often that we get to like really look under the hood of something like this. And so to hear everything that you've done, the way you've been so intentional about what you've done and your willingness to share with us, we really appreciate. And to all of our participants today, we also appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at another upcoming webinar, either later today at 3 o'clock or one of these others in the next coming weeks. So I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you again soon.